Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Whitaker, and today's topic is the intersection of autism and trauma. Now, if you watch my videos regularly, you've probably figured out by now that I have personally come through complex trauma, and I'm also an autistic individual. I was in my mid 40s when I started to suspect that I might have autism. And it was a few years later, after going down some rabbit holes and learning all I could about autism, that I went through an evaluation process and was finally officially diagnosed. Everything I've learned about autism has opened my eyes even wider as a trauma specialist, especially on the topic of trauma. Learning about the intersection of trauma and autism has helped me to understand and accept myself better. And as an unexpected and unforeseen side effect, it's actually made me more attuned and more skilled in the work that I do with clients. And ironically enough, understanding autism and understanding myself through the lens of autism has made me better at working with non-autistic clients. Go figure. But perhaps the biggest thing that I've learned is that some of the aspects of myself that I was trying to fix or heal wasn't actually trauma. And I didn't know that at the time. It was autism. It turns out I was much further along in my trauma recovery than I had thought for several years. And it was the diagnosis of autism that ultimately led to the realization, and it ultimately stopped me from trying to fix things about myself that were literally just who I am, wired into my neurology, stuff that I can't fix with trauma recovery skills. So I don't see autism as making me a broken person who needs fixing. I've been autistic my entire life. I just didn't know it until a couple years ago. I'm still the same person I've always been. And that person is, I'm Jennifer Whitaker, trauma specialist, and welcome to my YouTube channel. It's great to have you here or great to have you back. Please like, subscribe, share, and be sure to hit that bell so you don't miss any of my videos. So let's get back to today's topic on the intersection of trauma and autism. So diving in, according to Spectrum News, preliminary research studies are starting to confirm the idea and to show that what constitutes trauma may be different in people on the spectrum. Within the general population, it's common to think of big events as being the root cause of trauma and PTSD. Events such as abuse, sexual assault, violence, natural disasters, man-made disasters, and even wartime combat. However, findings suggest that among autistic individuals, less extreme experiences can be incredibly destabilizing and traumatizing. And this can include events like sudden booms or loud noises like fire alarms, paperwork that's complicated and overwhelming, the loss of a pet, offhand or sideways comments, being exposed to bullying, ostracizing, and teasing can all have a traumatic impact on an autistic person. The autistic nervous system is, in general, more sensitive and more hypervigilant to these types of events than a neurotypical nervous system is. Researchers Golan and Haresh have found that social incidents such as ostracizing are predictors of PTSD among autistic individuals, much more strongly than violent incidents like war, abuse, and terror. Go figure. The opposite tendency seems to be true for allistic individuals. Allistic simply means not autistic. Haresh said these studies are uncovering some important overlaps between autism and trauma. For instance, one study of 103 college students found that students who have more autistic traits also have more signs of PTSD, such as avoiding sources of trauma and negative changes in mood. The highest risk group of one was also the highest risk group in the other, Haresh said. The findings also uncovered some interesting and unexpected trends, such as the association between PTSD symptoms and autism traits. These traits are stronger in autistic men than in autistic women. But the opposite seems to be true for typical individuals. Typical not autistic or allistic women are 2 to 3 times more likely to develop PTSD than allistic men. So these inverted gender biases may eventually inform treatments. So keep your eyes out for that in the future. We're not quite sure where this study is going to take us. Autistic people present with a specific form of PTSD that's characterized by hyperarousal. So that's another surprising finding that came from these studies. Autistic folks are more easily startled. They're more likely to have insomnia, and they're predisposed to anger and anxiety. And they have much more difficulty concentrating than is seen in allistic PTSD. So there seems to be a recognition of an autistic subtype of trauma that's starting to emerge that could prove helpful in the future for spotting the signs earlier, treating it more effectively, or hopefully preventing it altogether. And these studies are once again proving the DSM, or the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, to be problematic, because the criteria outlined in the DSM for PTSD isn't nearly sensitive enough to detect the signs and symptoms within the autistic population, or the subtype that's starting to emerge. So hopefully the DSM will change in the future as a result as well. This also explains why doctors currently have a tendency to minimize and invalidate the experiences shared by their autistic patients. Hopefully, this study and others that are sure to follow will start to get the message out into the medical community more widely that there does seem to be a different subset of causes, signs, and symptoms of trauma and PTSD within the autistic community that doesn't fully overlap with the signs and symptoms of PTSD within the neurotypical community. So in other words, applying neurotypical criteria to the autistic population is misdiagnosing or not diagnosing a lot of people and leaving a lot of people behind, which being left behind is ironically one of the traumatizing things that can happen to an autistic person that will lead to, autistic trauma. Now, the following information and images that I'm going to share are adapted from the work of Stavropoulos and Balorian in the Journal of Clinical Medicine. So give me just a second to share my screen here. Okay, so to further complicate the intersection of PTSD and autism is the simple fact that some of the same signs and symptoms present in both conditions. But what some of the research is showing is that the underlying reasons for these signs and symptoms are vastly different. So it's important to break this down a bit. So the first one is the symptom that both share is a disinterest in peers or hanging out with friends or just going out and being social. Now, for someone experiencing PTSD, this is a form of social withdrawal. It's a protective coping mechanism that's common to PTSD. But if it's a symptom of autism, this could be more about differences in emotional reciprocity, or it could be due to conditions like alexithymia or prosopagnosia, or just the autistic person simply refusing to engage in performative social customs like some arbitrary amount of eye contact that we're supposed to make. The next symptom is trouble sharing emotions or affection. Now, both groups exhibit this symptom of having difficulty sharing emotions and showing affection. With PTSD, it makes it difficult to access what are called positive emotions like joy, pleasure, happiness, or contentment. But autistic individuals just communicate differently. And the double empathy problem studies are helping us to understand that a lot better. So this could be a double empathy issue, or it could be due to other conditions like alexithymia, or which is actually, a misnomer to label it emotion blindness, but that's what some people mistakenly call alexithymia. But alexithymia does occur to a much greater degree within the autistic population than in the general population. And just as a side note, if you want to know more about any of these conditions like alexithymia, prosopagnosia, the double empathy problem studies, please go to my YouTube channel and look on the playlist section, because I have a whole playlist that's rolling out this month on understanding autism. And these topics are going to be covered in their own little short videos within that series. The next symptom is repetitive behaviors, and this is a symptom that's common to both conditions. Now, in PTSD, these often result from intrusive thoughts and the coping strategies, that we're doing to get rid of the intrusive thoughts or the uncomfortable emotions, these things that seem to circulate like a hamster wheel. In autism, however, these repetitive behaviors help the autistic person to calm, to self-soothe, to focus better, or to self-regulate. And these repetitive behaviors are called stemming, which is short for self-stimulating behaviors. The next symptom that both conditions share is outbursts. Now, in PTSD, this is often a buildup of irritability and anger that has nowhere to go. It can feel like a pressure cooker on the inside until it finally blows in an outburst of words and gestures and behaviors. In autism, the outburst could result from a break in routine or that consistency in the schedule, because that routine and that consistency is stability and safety for autistic individuals. Or it could be due to an overwhelm of sensory input, because remember, the autistic nervous system just tends to be more sensitive, more on the hypervigilant side than an holistic or typical nervous system is. So what seems normal to an holistic person might cause a protective outburst due to sensory overwhelm in an autistic person. And finally, the last symptom I'm going to cover is insomnia. Now, for individuals who are struggling with PTSD, this is likely due to recurring nightmares, flashbacks, intrusive thoughts, and things like that. It can make it incredibly difficult to fall asleep, to stay asleep, or to fall back to sleep if you wake up in the middle of the night. For autistic folks, however, insomnia is a part of life. This is an incredibly common symptom associated with autism spectrum disorder conditions. So I hope you have found this information valuable, and I hope this helps you understand that the same behaviors that you're seeing in somebody who's struggling with PTSD versus somebody with autism might have very, very different motivations and impulses underlying them. What we think we're seeing isn't always what we're actually seeing. So as the topics of trauma and autism are more widely discussed out in the world, it's important to discuss the intersections and overlaps in symptomatology, because this is what will lead to more effective treatments and accommodations that benefit everyone, not just autistic folks, but everyone. All right, everyone, I hope you found this valuable. If you want more information on autism, don't forget to check my playlists and look for that Understanding Autism playlist. I know right now we're in the middle of April, so a lot of videos have already come out and more will roll out throughout the month. So that's another reason to be sure to hit that bell and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss anything. I'll see you next time, everyone. Happy self-discovery.